In a world shrouded in darkness, in a time when the people of Israel had turned away from the one true God, worshipping false idols and following the corrupt leadership of their king, a lone figure stood in the wilderness. His name was Elijah, a prophet chosen by God to speak truth and challenge a nation that had lost its way. Bold, unwavering, and filled with the power of God's Spirit, Elijah was sent to deliver a message not just of judgment but of hope, calling the people back to faith in the God who had never abandoned them. Elijah walked in obedience, performed mighty miracles, and stood against the forces of evil with courage and conviction, standing against 450 prophets of Baal. His unwavering faith would be put to the ultimate test. Would his belief ignite a fire that would consume the false prophets and their empty promises? Elijah's story serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of abandoning the true path. He stood against the tide during the reign of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. They had led the Israelites astray, worshipping the false god Baal. The land suffered a severe drought, a direct consequence of their idolatry. The people had forgotten the God of their ancestors. Elijah, a prophet of unwavering faith, emerged from the shadows. He challenged the prophets of Baal to a showdown. This contest would determine who served the true God. It was a bold declaration of faith in the face of overwhelming opposition. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation.
King Ahab, influenced by his wicked wife Jezebel, had allowed the worship of Baal to spread throughout Israel. Temples were built, altars erected, and the people turned away from the one true God. A devastating drought gripped the land, crops withered, and the people suffered. Despite fervent prayers and sacrifices, the drought persisted. Jezebel persecuted the prophets of Yahweh, forcing them into hiding. Her aim was to eradicate the worship of the true God and establish Baal as the supreme deity in Israel. Elijah, however, remained undeterred. He emerged from the wilderness, a solitary voice crying out against the apostasy of his people. His challenge to the prophets of Baal was a direct confrontation with the forces of evil. Elijah, standing before King Ahab and the assembled prophets of Baal, issued a bold challenge. "How long will you waver between two opinions?" he cried. "If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." He proposed a contest to determine who held true power. Each side would build an altar and prepare a sacrifice. They would then call upon their respective gods to send fire from heaven to consume the offering. The God who answered with fire would be declared the true God. The prophets of Baal readily accepted the challenge, confident in their God's power. They began their elaborate rituals, dancing around their altar, chanting incantations, and slashing themselves with knives. From morning until noon, the prophets of Baal continued their frantic rituals. They cried out to their God, begging him to send fire. They danced, they chanted, they cut themselves, but all to no avail. The altar remained untouched, the sacrifice unburnt. Their desperate pleas went unanswered. The prophets of Baal, exhausted and demoralized, began to lose heart. Their confidence turned to despair as the silence of their God became deafening. Elijah, meanwhile, stood calmly by, observing their futile attempts. He knew that the true God would not forsake him. As midday approached, Elijah began to mock the prophets of Baal. "Shout louder," he taunted. "Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy in the privy, or on a journey." Elijah then stepped forward and began to prepare his own altar. He took 12 stones, representing the 12 tribes of Israel, and rebuilt the altar of the Lord. He then arranged the wood, placed the bull upon it, and dug a trench around the altar. He instructed the people to fill 4 large jars with water and pour it over the altar and the sacrifice, repeating this process 3 times until the altar was drenched. As the sun began to set, Elijah prayed a simple yet powerful prayer to the Lord. He asked God to reveal himself to the people and to turn their hearts back to him. Suddenly, fire from heaven descended upon the altar, consuming the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, and even the water in the trench. The crowd gasped in awe and terror as they witnessed this spectacular display of God's power. Elijah's prayer had been answered in a dramatic and undeniable way. The power of the true God was manifest for all to see.